If you had to guess what were the Knicks' plans heading into the season, you'd probably have answered their main focus should be on developing their young players and preparing themselves for the future. But what would you have said if someone told you they'd be in a position to compete for a playoff spot after a third of the season had gone by? A few months ago, that may have sounded like someone was trying to fool you. However, after playing over 25 games in this shortened season, New York is currently in a position to participate in the play-in tournament. And with a few more wins, they could easily get into the top 6 in the East. But unsatisfied with being in the middle of the pack, the duo of Leon Rose and Tom Thibodeau made a surprising decision by trading for former MVP Derrick Rose. And as should have been expected, it didn't take long for the questions to arrive. Why Rose? Was that the right move? What will happen with the rest of the team? And as strange as it may sound, the truth is the Knicks may have actually made a good deal by adding the veteran point guard. There are multiple reasons why the move could pay off immediately, and today we'll take a deep look at each of them. For the Knicks, the offseason came with a sense of renovation. For the first time in a long time, they hired a coach that brought respect and credibility to the team in Thibodeau. His addition represented the latest in a series of moves that were intended to turn a losing culture into a winning one. However, that was probably the biggest signing they made. Despite their previous history of overpaying veterans that were past their prime and the many rumors that described their interest in making a trade for a star player, the front office decided to leave the roster mostly unchanged. Instead, they focused on the draft and the young prospects that were already part of the team and could potentially show some growth if given the chance to play a larger role. So, by the time the season was about to start, the Knicks roster featured most of the same players that had guided the team to a 21-45 record during the previous year, along with a few prospects that would probably need some time before being capable of contributing to winning. In other words, there were no reasons to assume they would make a significant leap forward. Everyone expected them to be at the bottom of the standings once again, and it wasn't clear how long it would take them to find their next franchise player. But the Knicks wouldn't allow expectations to define their season. As soon as Thibodeau got the job, he started challenging his players so they would be ready to play the best basketball of their careers, and so they did. From the first day of the season, it was evident the team was playing differently. They hadn't suddenly turned into a championship contender, but they were better organized and played more disciplined on the defensive end. Most importantly, they found their offensive leaders in Julius Randle and R.J. Barrett. With their newfound confidence in the emergence of Randle as an all-star candidate, the Knicks had a better start than anyone could have predicted. And after a few weeks, they found themselves right in the middle of the playoff race in the Eastern Conference. But there was a catch. Early on in the season, their play proved to be good enough to compete against most teams. In fact, they were even capable of getting some quality wins against teams like the Bucks, Jazz, and Celtics. However, as the seasons progressed, it became harder for them to keep pace with the better teams, and so despite playing in the weaker conference, they slowly started to fall out of the top 8. Of course, that didn't seem to be a reason for concern. They were still playing better than expected, and their young players were receiving valuable playing time that would help them develop their games. So most people believed they would leave things untouched, even if that meant missing on the playoffs. But as it turned out, Rose and Thibodeau had other things in mind. They believed their team should try to win as many games as possible. And if there were any players available that could help them achieve that goal without costing a steep price, then it was worth taking the risk. So as soon as they learned Derrick Rose wanted to leave Detroit, they decided to make an offer for him. And before long, the point guard was heading to a second reunion with his former coach. For Detroit, the deal made a lot of sense. Before the season even started, it was clear Rose wouldn't reach the finish line wearing a Pistons uniform. That was only natural, considering they were in the middle of a rebuild. So the only real question was where he would be playing next. However, no one would have thought of the Knicks as an option. According to Pistons coach Dwayne Casey, the point guard told him that he wanted to spend the remaining years of his career in a situation where he would be able to participate in the playoffs and had wanted to go to a championship contender. And had he wanted to go to a championship contender, he would have had the chance to do so. After all, teams like the Clippers and Bucks were reportedly interested in acquiring his services, and they probably could have made a better offer than the Knicks. So how is it that Derrick ended up in New York? Well, in his own words, he wanted to play there. He wanted to reunite with Thibodeau and Executive Vice President William Wesley. And most importantly, he wanted to be at a place where he felt comfortable. Does that make sense from a basketball standpoint? That remains to be seen. And if the Knicks miss the playoffs, he may regret not joining a championship contender. But regardless of that, he now gets to play on his own terms, and that's a win for him. But what about the Knicks? As soon as the deal was announced, it was evident the basketball world had a divided opinion about it. Some thought it was great for the team to acquire a former MVP that could excel as a sixth man, make plays when the game was on the line, and mentor the younger players. However, some believe the trade could end up being harmful to the Knicks. On one hand, the presence of a ball-dominant point guard could harm the synergy of the team. On the other, adding Rose to the roster could create a logjam at the point guard position. And then, there was a concern that seemed to be present for most people on both sides. If the team had to give minutes to Rose, would they take them away from promising rookie Emmanuel Quickley? Each of those concerns are valid, and considering the team's history with veterans in recent years, it's only natural that Knicks fans feel like they're about to see the same pattern repeat itself all over again. On top of that, Thibodeau has a reputation for not giving heavy minutes to young players regardless of how talented they may be. Of course, that narrative, it's debatable, but there's no doubt Rose has always been one of his favorite players. So it could be tempting for Tibbs to give Rose more minutes at the expense of Quickley, especially if the game is a close one. However, it didn't take long for the team to dismiss those concerns. The first thing Rose did after joining the team was to take Quickley and Obi Toppin to dinner to let them know he wasn't there to take their place, but to offer his help and guidance whenever they needed it. Thibodeau also addressed those concerns by letting the world know Quickley's minutes would remain intact, and instead of Rose taking his place in the rotation, they would be playing most of the minutes together from now on, thus allowing both guards to play off of each other. The one having his minutes reduced would end up being Austin Rivers, something that probably didn't bother most people, considering his poor performance during the last few days. But now that it's clear Rose's addition won't affect Quickley's development as a player, let's take a look at the areas where the Knicks hope to make the most improvement going forward. The most evident area where Rose can make a positive impact is on offense. Currently, New York has one of the best defensive ratings in the league. But when it comes to offense, things have been completely different. The team has struggled to find consistent production outside of Randall and Barrett, and when either of them has an off night, things have usually been bad for the Knicks. As a result, they're in the bottom 10 in the league in offensive rating, and that's exactly where Rose's help should be the most appreciated. Despite no longer being an MVP and having a questionable three-pointer, Derrick remains arguably one of the most skilled point guards in the game. His ability to read defenses and attack at the right moment makes him a deadly weapon for any team. His athleticism is also at a high level. He won't be making spectacular dunks as often as he did in his early years, but his speed and ability to control his body while in the air remains spectacular. He's also embraced a role as a sixth man since joining the Pistons, and if it wasn't for his team's record, he could have been a candidate for Sixth Man of the Year during last season. So his contributions off the bench should also be of a very high level. Last but not least, his presence as a veteran leader should help the younger players become the best version of themselves. By taking Quickley and Toppin under his wing, he'll be able to prepare them for the ups and downs of life in the league while also helping them unlock their potential. And while players like Randall and Barrett may not need that much help, having a player that's been literally through it all by their sides should help them improve as players and leaders. All in all, their surprising start to the season has put the Knicks in a situation no one expected them to be this early. Still, they've managed to handle things very well so far, and the steps Leon Rose and Thibodeau have taken make it seem like the team may finally be ready to turn the page. But does that mean they should be aiming to make the playoffs? If they believe they're good enough to get there, there's no reason why they shouldn't try. If things go wrong, they'll end up with another lottery pick. But if everything works out, they may become one of the most intriguing stories of this unique season. But now, do you believe the Rose trade will push the Knicks closer to the postseason? Or is it only a matter of time before their hopes start to fade away? Let us know in the comments. We hope you've enjoyed today's video, and if you did, remember to like it and subscribe to our channel for more NBA content. We are Courtside.